Good afternoon and welcome. So this is our first webinar in our new building. So if we have some glitches here and there, you just have to excuse us. Hopefully you can all see me and hear me. You should see an arrow in orange at the top right of your screen. This will allow you to minimize and maximize the screen. So I'm assuming you can all see that. There are two buttons that you need to be aware of. You can hit the little hand button, and that will allow you to ask a question. So if you have a question, you can hit the hand button, and that'll allow you to ask in two ways. You can do it over the phone or with your computer microphone so that you can actually speak to me, us, or and we'll unmute you when it's time. So right now, all of you are muted. So if you were to talk, we can't hear you. We can unmute you, we as in the royal we, Paul and Pauline and others that are here with me. They're able to unmute you when we're ready for you to ask the question. Or you can type the question by hitting the question button, and then you can type it and it gets sent to us, and Paul and Pauline and others will tell me what the question is, and I'll do my very best to answer the question at the end. So what I'm going to do is go through the presentation, and then at the end we'll give you all kinds of opportunity to ask the question. And if all of that is foreign to you and you don't know, you can't do it, then you can call the office at 1-902-469-1474, and Nancy will take your question, write it down, and bring it in to us. So if you can't do it the way I just explained, no worries, just call the office. Nancy answers the phone, and you can tell her your question. She'll write it down and bring it in for us to answer. So there's no reason for any of you to have a question that goes unanswered. And all that to say, if you still have questions after we're done, you can always email me, and I will answer your question by email. So I'm really pleased to have those that have joined us, and we are recording this, so we'll have it up so that those of your colleagues that didn't get an opportunity to come in and listen to this, they can listen to it on our website. Like I said, this is our first time in our new building doing this technology, so I'm hoping that you guys will like it, and we do and would like your feedback. Did you find it good, bad, or indifferent? Did you find it easy, hard, whatever? So just let us know what you thought of it so that we can improve it going on to the future, because this is the way that we want to communicate with our membership so that you're able to participate, see us, and that's new technology. So we'd really like your feedback on that. So what I want to talk about now is what you're here to talk about is violence specifically in our emergency room departments, specifically in our smaller community hospitals in the province. So I'm going to talk first about what happened. So you see this first slide talks about violence is not part of the job. And that is key. Most of us nurses feel that, oh, well, that's what happens. I'm a nurse. And so being a nurse, sometimes people get upset with us and they verbally abuse us, yell at us, whatever. Sometimes they physically abuse us, hit, slap, hit, punch, kick, spit. All of that happens, and I'm sure each of you sitting there can say, yes, it happened to me. You can all recall a time when it happened to you. So the nurses' unions across the country and other healthcare unions are saying, you know what, it's not acceptable. It's not part of our job. It's not something that we should expect. It's not okay for someone to abuse us verbally, and it is abuse, verbally, physically. It's not part of our job. When we go to work, we need to be able to go to work, and come home safe. We need to be able to come home and be with our families. We do our jobs, we get paid for our jobs, but the abuse part is not part of it. And so we are working really, really hard to make sure you, our nurses, know that it's unacceptable, and that you, our nurses, report it, and that the employer and the union protect you so that it doesn't happen again. So we want zero tolerance for violence. So there's a poster that you see in front of you. That poster is for the nurses union, but we will have another poster that will have 4 healthcare workers, a nurse and 3 others, That will be sometime in January. We'll have that, and the message will be the same. The employer has committed to us that they will put these posters up in a very public place in our facilities. So that's the employer's commitment to you, that not only is your union saying it's not part of your job, but so is your employer and the funder, the government. So that poster will be up in your workplaces in probably February or so. But this one is for the nurses union developed, and we will be sending those out for you to put on the union, the nurses union bulletin board. So what are we here to talk about today? So what we're here to talk about is there was a very serious incident in one of our emergency departments in Middleton in the fall, in which could have been a very dangerous situation. There was an individual charged that went into our emergency department and was acting inappropriately. And that individual was charged. And most of us know and have had patients' families, visitors. We've all experienced times where the police have come in and charged or taken visitors or others away, or had to stay with them because of their violent tendencies, had to stay while they're in our emergency department. So this was just another incident. And what happened was basically because people are charged, and when people are charged, it's public. So it's made public. And that's how the nurses union found out about that situation, is basically, I read it in the paper. So, of course, the union was upset, always is, when these kinds of situations happens in our emergency department. And not only was the union upset, but this incident happened in the premier's, so our premier riding. So it happened in a hospital where he frequents. And so he, as well, was upset because he read about it and knew what could have happened, what didn't happen, but could have happened. So it's, and we all know that, like, what could have. So he got in touch with me to say, like, this could have been really serious. And of course, and I said, well, this is happening and happens far too often in our emergency departments and in our other departments, where our nurses are subjected to potentially violent situations, but often violent situations where our nurses are assaulted. So he said, well, that's just not acceptable. Like, I mean, what can we do about this? So we talked, and I said, I think what we could do is we should bring together all the stakeholders and let's talk about it and see how we can prevent it. So that's exactly what happened. The premier asked the Department of Health, your employer, the health authority, the unions, all the 4 unions, the healthcare unions, which would be QP, Unifor, NSGEU, and the nurses union, to come together with other stakeholders to talk about how can we, going forward, make sure this doesn't happen again. What do we need to have in place to protect the healthcare workers and the nurses from potentially violent situations? So we did that, and I'll tell you who was on the committee. So the health authority assigned the vice president of human resources. Her name is Carmel D'Entremont, and myself were co-chairs of this committee. And also on this committee was the Department of Health and Wellness. They sent representatives. NSGEU, QP, Unifor, Workers' Compensation Board of Nova Scotia, AWARE-NS, which is a group that works on safety in healthcare, the Department of Labor and Advanced Education, the RCMP, because they're obviously a stakeholder and a partner, Paladin Security, and Paladin Security provides the security for the health authority for the majority of our facilities. GASHA has their own security, and they were represented by Unifor. So they're employees of the health authority of GASHA, but they have their union. Unifor was there, and the Cape Breton Police, because it's not just the RCMP that provides policing services for our facilities. So this committee we met every week from October till the end of December, and then we had another brainstorming 2 or 3 hour session to talk about what are we going to do. So what we did is we developed 12 recommendations, and we built strategies around these recommendations. One of the things that the unions in particular talk to the employer and government about is we don't want this to be just another report that sits on a shelf somewhere gathering dust. We want to make sure whatever recommendations that come out of this, they're done. So it's not, it would be nice if, and whenever it happens, it happens. We were very clear that we didn't want that to happen. And actually the Premier said in his direction to the employer, to all of us, I want recommendations on my desk or on the Minister of Health's desk by December the 30th. And I want to make sure that there's commitment from all parties that whatever these recommendations will be, that if they're going to be followed through. So that was the direction given by the Premier to the employer, the Department of Health, the unions, and others. So he expected us to come up with a report that was actionable. That was basically his mandate to all of us. So it wasn't just to the employer and to the Department of Health, it was all of us. We have to work together to make sure that we have a healthy workplace. So the report, and you can see that one of our nurses is on the front of the report. That's the cover of the report. And I must say, we're very proud. I'm very, very proud of this report. Of all of the projects I've worked on since I've been your president, this is probably one of the ones that I'm most proud of, because there's really solid recommendations. There's solid commitment from your employer, from the union, and from the Department of Health and Wellness that these recommendations are coming through. And these recommendations, I truly believe, are going to make your workplace safer. Will it eliminate violence in our workplace? Unfortunately not. But will it help decrease it? I believe it will. And I believe that we are going to equip our nurses and others with what they need to do their job safer. So the first thing that we talked about is, okay, good. So how are we going to come together? What kind of mechanism are we going to have? So what we've decided is we're going to have a provincial occupation health and safety committee. And that's going to have the unions and the employer, and we're going to meet quarterly. And what we're going to meet is we're going to talk about what are the trends out there. So why is it there's a violent incident in Badek every other Friday night? What is it about Friday nights in Badek that there's a violent incident? What is it? And so we're going to look at that and say, okay, it's whatever it is, and whatever it is, we're going to try and fix it. We have a commitment now from the employer that we're going to come up with a mechanism to report. So how do the unions find out about incidents that involve their members? So if a nurse is punched or slapped or hit, how does the Nova Scotia Nurses Union find out about that? Where's the mechanism for all of that? Because right now, you fill out a form, and we don't necessarily see it unless it's a CCR report. And on that, if you experience a violent incident or a near miss, you should be filling out our CCR reports so that there's a guarantee that your union finds out about it. However, that doesn't always happen because your near misses we don't often see. So the commitment from the employer is that we're going to develop a mechanism, a process. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but there's commitment it's going to happen. There's going to be a process to make sure the union finds out when these incidents happen. And that is going to be done. So another thing that I wanted to talk about is all of these recommendations come with a time frame. Like I said, it's not going to be a report that sits on a desk gathering dust. Every single recommendation comes with a time frame. So the commitment, and this commitment is from the employer. The commitment is this will be done by February 28, 2017. So that's 6 weeks away. So there's huge, that's a lot of work, and they've committed that they're going to do it. And so I'm very proud of that. The other thing, another recommendation is workplace violence prevention program. So this process, so I don't want people to think that your employer has been doing nothing for the since they became a provincial health authority. We are, as you know, one health authority now, one employer. And when they inherited all the 9 health authorities, they inherited policies and procedures that are different in Cape Breton and Yarmouth. So what they've been working on, and they have been working on it, is trying to get one process. And so us coming in just helped speed that along, but they were working on it. So I don't want to imply that there was nothing happening out there. There was, but now there's a concerted effort. It's been highlighted, I believe, and so now they're going to continue to work with our help. So the unions are now committed to help them through the process. Right now, there needs to be risk assessments done of our merged departments and other departments across the country, across the province. So what that means is a committee, the JOSH committees within your facilities, but they're not going to do the work. Someone's going to come in and assess, for example, an emergency department, and they're going to do a risk assessment. So they're going to look to see, okay, where's the exits? Like, so if there was an incident, how do the nurses and others get out? Is there an exit? Is there an ability for the nurse to communicate when she's in trouble? How do we identify risks? If someone were to come in, how do they come in? What other departments would be at risk? Like, so depending on where your weight room is, all those kinds of things. It's called a risk assessment. They've committed by the end of April to have risk assessments done in these community emergency departments, which are basically most rural, like Tatamagouche, Middleton, Twin Oaks, and the Deck. Those are the kinds of emergency departments we're doing first, because the bigger ones, like Cape Breton, Colchester, they have significantly more staff on a night shift or on a weekend shift than some of our rural where we only have 2 nurses. So the commitment is to start with the smaller ones, make sure that their risk assessment's done, make sure their nurses are equipped to handle, and then the plan, I believe, is to move on. So what does that mean? What does a risk assessment mean? Well, one of the things that we need is education. So are the people working in that department educated in violence prevention, assessment, reporting, all of those things? So what is your responsibility as a nurse if a violent incident were to happen in your facility? What's your responsibility? How do you mitigate it? How do you deal with it? How do you report it? All of that is going to require education. And the employer is committed that they're going to provide you with the education you need to be safe at work. But then we have, under recommendation number 3, another issue, and it's our data system. So right now we have a disjointed system out there. We have systems that don't talk to one another. We have various ways of reporting. We have all kinds of mishmash. So what the employer has committed to is by December of 2017, and I know it seems far off, but it's a huge amount of work, they're going to have a single province-wide system. So it's going to be the same. Everything's going to be the same, whether in Yarmouth or Cape Breton. The reporting's going to be the same. The identification of risk is going to be the same. The risk, everything is going to be the same as of December. So this is going to be hugely important for us to allow us to look at trends. And not just us as in the big us, the employer. When I say us, I mean everyone. So we're going to look at trends. We're going to be able to hopefully identify problems before they happen. So for example, in the risk assessment, under the data management and the risk assessment, they may look at it and say, we don't think there's adequate security on Wednesday nights in X hospital. And there seems to be an increase of incidents on Wednesday night. Well, does that have anything to do with the fact there's no security? Maybe it does. So what do we do about that? Obviously, put security. Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. That's going to be in the risk assessment. But right now, it also ties into our data management, which is the recommendation, because right now we don't see those trends. Like, we may or may not know about what's happening on a Wednesday night in a facility. Number 4 is the violence risk assessment, and what that means is, you know how when someone comes into our hospital that has potential of falling. So one of our seniors or others come in and we do an assessment, their risk of falling. So we don't do that, however, when someone comes in that could potentially be violent or aggressive. So what's going to happen as by August, again, these timelines, they're commitments from the employer, which we all should be very happy about. There's going to be an assessment. So when they come into your emerge department, you're going to have as we see it, it's not developed yet, and we're going to look for best practice across the country. We're going to look to find what assessment tools are out there. It's going to be a little tick thing, as I see it, I'm not sure, that says you're going to ask a bunch of questions, and then you're going to identify Janet Hazelton, based on the answers to these questions, has a potential to be aggressive, has a potential to be violent. And so Janet Hazelton will be flagged so that others will know that she's been assessed to be potentially aggressive, violent, non-compliant, could create a nursing challenge for us. And that's going to be done by our nurses. So this is part of it. It's not all the employer doing all the work. We have to do some too. And so our nurses will be completing those assessments when they admit someone to hospital or admit someone to the emergency room. Recommendation number 5 is emergency response. So we're going to have a province-wide emergency response policies. So the code white is a code white regardless of where you are. And the response to the code white is going to be the same regardless of where you are. So right now, code white usually means the same thing, but the response may not be the same. It will be the same in the future. Lockdown. One of the things that was particularly of interest to us, well, to the Premier, was when this incident happened in his riding, in his hospital, he said, well, you know, like, why didn't the hospital get locked down? I said, we don't lock down hospitals. What do you mean? We lock down schools? I said, yeah, well, maybe we do, but we don't lock down hospitals. There is no lockdown procedures when something should happen. We said, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, whether it makes sense or not, that's the truth. There is no lockdown. Well, it's true that schools have lockdowns. And what that means is the police in that, for example, Truro is where I live. The police in Truro know that if there is a threat at CEC, they know exactly what to do. They know exactly the layout of the CEC. They know how many teachers are there. They know where the students would be. They know it all. And that's their lockdown procedures. And apparently, it's for every school in this province. There's a lockdown. And every police force that services that school has a lockdown procedure. They know exactly what to do if there was a threat within the school. The plan is going to be developed for our hospitals. So there's going to be lockdown policies and procedures for our facilities. So if the nurses or whomever decides to lock down the facility, the police that service that area will know exactly this is where their emerge is, this is where their x-ray is, this is where the incident is, this is the way I should come at it. This is the way I should enter or exit. This is how I'm going to close off the rest of the building so that nobody is walking through that area. They're going to develop that, and we are going to have our own internal procedures so that if it should happen, what do we do with the visitors coming from the second floor that have to get out to the parking lot and they have to walk right through the area where the incident is happening? Right now, it's not managed at all, and if it's managed by our nurses if they think about it. But that's not going to be in the future. In the future, there's going to be procedures. So that's kind of, I think, exciting. It's going to obviously keep not just our nurses safe, but the other people that could be in the building. And if the lockdown were to happen, obviously people aren't going to be able to get into the building during that time, and they shouldn't be in our building. We don't need any more than what we're handling. So recommendation number 6 is all about education and training. So this is all well and good, the lockdown and all of the things that I'm talking about, but none of it's any good unless you, the nurses, know about it. So unless you guys are educated and trained to know what is the lockdown procedure, what should I do when, how do I report, what about nonviolent crisis intervention? Like, does everybody have it? Hard to know. Apparently, some do, some don't. What about any other kind of intervention I should take if this situation? Is the level of education the same for a nurse in Emerge as it is for the person that's answering the phone, as it is for the ward clerk? Various healthcare professionals are going to require various levels of education. And the employer, through the risk assessment, is going to, and the JOSH committee, is going to decide the nurses need this, others need this, and they're going to make sure that that happens. And that's going to be done, all of you are going to be done by December of 2017. Again, it may seem like it's far off, but it's better December 2017 than December of whenever. Like this, so that big committee I talked about at the front, we will be saying, come December of 2017, because I'll be sitting on that committee, I'll be saying, so how are we doing with the education training? By the end of this month, it's supposed to be all done. And they're going to have to say, yes, it is, because they've committed to it. The next one, recommendation number 7, is one that I think is of particular interest. It's all about security. Right now, we have Paladin security in most of our facilities, like I say, except for Gasha. And quite frankly, we're not using them appropriately or properly. And that's no one's fault. It is what it is. These individuals have training on how to deal with aggressive or violent behavior or patients. So they're trained to be able to intervene to help you if you were to experience a situation where a patient was getting aggressive or violent. Like I said, it's not part of your job. It's not what you're hired to do. You're hired to care for them. You're not hired to fight them. So what security is going to do, and they can do, is they can intervene. So they can and should be part of the team. And many of you that I've talked to over the last 6 or 7 months said, oh no, security can't touch a patient. Yes, they can. Yes, they can. They're committed to. In fact, they're supposed to. So what's going to happen into the future, and most nurses just don't know it. So they don't make them or ask them, not make them, ask them to come help because they didn't understand, nurses, that they could. Many nurses said, well, I mean, they can't. Well, they can, and our nurses are going to be educated to know that they can. So if a patient were to come in and you were a little uncomfortable for whatever reason, you can actually invite security into the room while you do your assessment. If that makes you, you're perfect, they're part of the team, they're allowed. And in the future, I hope you will. I hope you will say, you know what, I'm a little intimidated, I'm a little concerned, can you come in and just stand there? And they're committed to it. They are under your direction, though. So they're not going to unless you ask them. But you can certainly ask them, and they are going to do it. Like the commitment from security. Now remember, I said that they were at the table with us. So the commitment from the head of the Paladin Security ensures us that they can, and that they're educated properly, and that they're equipped to do it, and that they will do it. So you need to take that and deal with it. Like, you need to, not deal with it, but you need to take that and use it. You need to use them. They're getting paid. They're paid to support you. They want to support you, but you're in charge as the nurse, and you need to use them appropriately. And that's going to be done by August. So I think what I said at the table was, this is fantastic. We just need to make sure our nurses know. Because in my opinion, well, not my opinion, I know most of you didn't know that they could play such a key role. Number 8 is of particular importance to certainly me, a all-around employee communication. Many of you are out there in very vulnerable situations, like you're in a treatment room with someone, and all of a sudden they get a little bit angry, and you're isolated in the room by yourself with no way of alerting your colleagues or others that you're in trouble. Some, like Guysborough, for example, they do have communication, a personal panic button, for lack of a better term. So Guysborough have something, Middleton had nothing, others had various things. So what the employer has committed to is personal alarms will be provided to employees when they're in vulnerable situations. So, but what we need to do first is risk assessment. So, for example, I can tell you, Colchester Hospital, their new hospital, the nurses' station is in the middle, and then they have doors, patients up and down the hall on either side, and so and they're glass doors, so you can see your colleagues pretty much all the time that you're in the rooms. Well, maybe when they do their risk assessment, they don't need a personal panic, they need something different. So the risk assessment is going to talk about what communications do these nurses and others need in this hospital, in this place. Other places, like Middleton, for example, the nurses, when they go into a treatment room down the hall, they're isolated. So if they were to get in trouble, there's no way that they can communicate with their nurse colleagues, and so that's a problem. So when they do their risk assessment, they may come up with a personal panic device. So it's going to be individualized depending on the risk assessment, but it is going to be an ability to communicate with your colleagues if you were in trouble. In the meantime, until the risk assessments are done, those of you that don't have anything are going to get, for lack of a better term, it's called screechers. So you will have a personal alarm that you'll be able to push, and all it's going to do is make a noise. It's not going to communicate with anybody. In the future, the communication device is going to be able to communicate with security or the front desk or the RCMP or somebody, but the screechers are just an alarm, and that the employer has committed that will give the nurses in wherever this until we get the risk assessment done to decide what is the appropriate communication device that that facility needs. So that's on the communications. The whole workplace violence and how do we report it situation came up, and we talked about that. And what we need is we need to make the ability for you to report easy, quick. The last thing you need is a whole bunch more work. So what we've asked for is nurses should be able to report this online, by phone, by paper, however it is, to make sure that the information gets to where it needs to get to. And we're going to use this for trends. We're going to use this to hopefully protect you a little better in the future. And this should be in place by December. One of the things that I didn't talk about, but I need to, is the assumption that some people have that the employer, they don't care. They could care less if I'm safe. That is not true. The health authority is very concerned. They really do want to make sure that you come to work safe and you go home safe. There's some process pieces that we have to work out, but I want to assure you the commitment was absolutely there to make sure that you guys are all safe at work. So it's not the union that wants to make sure you're safe, it's everybody. So I do want to say that the health authority was keenly involved and really did work hard to make sure this report got done when it was supposed to get done, and their commitment is there. So number 10, recommendation number 10 is violence alert identification. So this one was a bit tricky, and we haven't completely landed. We understand that if a patient has violent tendencies, and let's say they're discharged from Colchester and they were particularly violent when they were there, and now they're gone to Antigonish, and they get admitted to Antigonish a day later, 2 days later, a week later, but guess what? The nurses in the Antigonish emergency department have no idea what happened 2 weeks before that at Colchester, where the patient got violent, and let's say they hit a nurse and the police had to come in, and I'm just making this up, and then 2 weeks later they get admitted to St. Martha's and nothing. What the employer has committed to, and this is by the end of December, is if I plug the patient's name into my computer in Antigonish, the flag is going to come up to say, you know what, Janet Hazelton was in Truro 2 weeks ago and she exhibited some behavior that was not appropriate. So there's going to be a flagging within the charting system, which we don't have now. And then the other thing we have to talk about and work on is, so what? That's great that I know, and I'm the nurse looking after Janet Hazelton, and I know she's not to go at her this way, or not to confront her or not to get in her space, because I know, because I developed a plan and I know all about it. But that's not very helpful for the other nurses or the kitchen staff or the cleaning staff. That's not helpful that I know this information, but no one else does. So we are going to develop some sort of a visual tool. And it's not, the visual tool won't say that Janet Hazelton's violent. What the tool might be, and if it's an arm bracelet, it might be, when you see this arm bracelet, all the staff will know that you need to go talk to the nurse's station, to the nurse, to say, before I go give Janet Hazelton her tray, I noticed she had a bracelet on. What's that about? And so you'll be able to share that, well, no, I'll take the tray in, or if in some situations don't come at them this way, or whatever it is, the nurses will share with the other staff in hopes to prevent a violent situation. So that's the plan. I don't know what it is yet, but there will be some sort of a visual cue for others to see that this individual requires you to talk to the nurses. Go see the nurses before you interact with this patient. So I think that's going to be very helpful. Number 11 is information sharing. So we have lots of people out there. We have WCB, we have AWARE-NS, we have the Health Authority, we have the Occupational Health and Safety Division. We have all kinds of people that want to make sure that we are safe at work. But we're not so good at necessarily all talking to one another, and so we're going to get better at that. We commit to you that we're going to strive to make sure that, for example, do you have the right to refuse? Do nurses have the right to refuse? Are they able to say, you know what, I don't want to look after that patient because he's hitting me? Well, do you have the right to refuse? When does it come into place? How do you use it? And what do you do? And all of that is going to be, that's under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Well, that's great. So, but we have to talk to the Occupational Health and Safety Division to say, okay, so what happens to the patient then? So all of those things have to be worked out, and you, the nurses, and others need very clear direction on what is expected of you if a patient or a family member or is not cooperating and in fact being aggressive towards you. The other thing is we want to share. We need to start sharing our information. You know, it's no good for workers' comp to know how many nurses are getting injured at work if they're not going to share it with us, and we're not going to look at trends, and we're not going to try and figure out why is it that all of these nurses are hurt at X hospital. Is it because of violence? Is it because they don't have lifts? Is it because, what's the reason for it? And hopefully that will help keep us safe. The other thing, number 12, which is probably one of the most important of all the recommendations, is the Health Authority has committed that January 12th of 2018, so I know that sounds like it's a long time away, but we all know how fast the year goes, the Health Authority is going to have to report to the Minister of Health to say, here's the 12 recommendations, and here's where we are on those. So it's almost like a report card. And we all know how, when we were kids, we wanted a good report card when we went home to see our parents. Like, so the Health Authority doesn't want to be saying, oh, of the 12 recommendations, we did 3. I don't believe they will, but at the same time, there is a very solid recommendation that the Health Authority will report to the minister on their progress with these recommendations. So that's the 12. Those are the 12 recommendations. I've got to say, like I said at the outset, I'm extremely proud of this work. I think it's going to go a long way to keep us safe. I think it's important because it proves to our nurses that the union, the nurses union, takes it very serious. Your employer takes it very serious. The Department of Health takes it very serious. This is the proof. And I commit to you that the nurses unions and others, we will work hard over the next year to make sure all of these recommendations get implemented when they said they're going to get implemented. I don't believe that that anyone, I know that that no one wants you to get injured at work, and I truly believe that the Health Authority has taken this very, very seriously, and they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that violent incidents. One of the things that I do want to talk briefly about is there is a difference, and you need to understand this. There is a difference between a patient you're caring for that's acting inappropriately or violently and a family member. Under no circumstances should it happen in either, but absolutely no circumstances should you ever, ever tolerate verbal or physical abuse from a patient's family, from a visitor, from a non-patient. You shouldn't have to from anybody, but absolutely you do not have to put up with it, and you need to call security to have that person removed immediately. There's a little more complexity around it when it's a patient, but when it's not a patient, you need to absolutely call security and ask for that patient to be removed. So now that's it for me. That's all. You have an opportunity to ask me whatever you want. Remember, I told you you could call 902-469-1474 and talk to Nancy, but we prefer you try the technology. So like I said, you can ask, there's two buttons, the little hand, if you'd like to ask the question over your phone or your computer microphone, and we'll unmute you to do that, obviously, or you can type the question by hitting the little question button. I don't know where it is. You showing them, Paul? Yeah, so you can hit the little question button. Oh, we have a question. Now, where did this question come from? By computer or by telephone? Oh, awesome, by computer. Good for you, whoever did it. It says the question, copy of the school's hold and secure and lockdown policy and procedures are available on the Department of Education website. Had to become familiar with it in recent past as a new employee in one of our youth health centers. Will locals be getting a copy of this report, the report that I'm just talking about? Absolutely. Tomorrow, the Premier and the two co-chairs will be giving it tomorrow at noontime. Once that happens, the report will be up on our website. You can download it, you can share it, you can do whatever you want with it. The lockdown, as far as the lockdown policy specifically, if that's what you're talking about, I suspect if it's available on the website via the Department of Education, it would be for the Department of Health. I'm just assuming that. I do know that the one that the police have, apparently we were told at the committee level, nobody gets that, only the police. So only the RCMP know the lockdown process and procedures for a particular school. It's not shared with the staff of the school. We were told that by the RCMP. So that piece you won't get, but the lockdown will be shared because you're going to have to be educated on it. There's another question coming. So don't forget that I would like to hear from you about this process, whether you enjoyed it, whether you liked it, whether you thought it was too cumbersome. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Love this format. There you go. Very timely topic. Has the College of Registered Nurses and the College of Licensed Practicing Nurses been considered to join the committee? This may be useful, especially when discussing the nurse's right to refuse care and how that relates to the standards. I did talk to the colleges about this committee, and really we didn't involve them because only a small little piece of the work was on the right to refuse. They do have a document, the College of Registered Nurses specifically have a document on their website about the right to refuse care. But we are going to have more concrete conversations with them as we go along. So no, they weren't on the committee, but when we get to that piece of work, we're going to have to engage both colleges to talk about the right to refuse and when. But clearly, you have the right to refuse if you feel in danger. So you never have to put yourself in danger, ever. You have the right to refuse, just like you have the right to protect yourself. Every citizen of this province has the right to protect themselves. So you have the right to use whatever means you need to protect yourself. No one is expected to get injured either at work or out on the street. So that was made clear to us. by the police when at this committee that right now, if I was feeling threatened and someone was coming at me, I have the right to use whatever force I need to protect myself. That's the law. That's the rules. And that includes patients, and that includes nurses, because we're all citizens. Several questions are on the way. This is awesome. So tomorrow, like I said, once the Premier and the two co-chairs, myself and Carmel, release this report publicly, which will be noontime tomorrow, this will be up on our website right after. Okay. I don't have a question. I have to get back to work, but I just wanted to say how impressed I am with these recommendations. Thanks for always having our back and looking out for us. Well, you're welcome. And it's, like I say, it's easy, it's not easy, but it's easy to represent such a dedicated group of professionals like nurses. And it's inexcusable that what we put up with every single day that we go to work. It's not acceptable, inexcusable, and it's going to stop. Will this webinar be available on NSNU website? Yes. Tomorrow, it'll be up tomorrow, so you can share it as much as you like. Do Paladin Security have to sign confidentiality agreements as part of employment agreement, especially if you're asking them to come into the room while doing a patient assessment? Yes. So they have the same obligations around confidentiality as you do. So feel free to bring them into the room when you're doing an assessment if you feel that that's helpful. And one of the things that we had someone at our AGM last year from a security in Ontario, and he was telling us that their security do go in for any assessments, triaging, if the nurse is feeling uncomfortable. And just by doing that, just by having them in the room, not saying a word, just standing there, their incidence of aggression decreased. So for whatever reason, people respond to that security, probably the uniform, just like they respond to our uniforms. They respond, and it just settles them down. So I encourage you, if you are concerned at all, bring them into the room. If you have to give a treatment, and they're in the treatment room, and you're concerned, bring them in. I mean, you might have, you can pull a curtain, or you can have them right outside the door, or whatever it is, but have them close. Very informative, great format, enjoyed it very much. I think we should be able to use this as an education point for an equivalent of a lunch and learn. I agree. I agree, and I will tell Carmel tomorrow that this is a lunch and learn, and I expect the nurses that participated. The problem might be is we have no way of knowing who participated and who didn't, but oh yes, we do. But then if they watch it if they watch the tape, we won't be able to figure that out. But surely to heavens, if they trust you to give medications and they trust you to say you did, that the nurses that watched it and say they watched it, surely they're not going to argue with you. Was Doctors Nova Scotia invited to participate in the committee? No. No, they weren't. There was a physician that came to the last 2 or 3 meetings to give the perspective, and I believe he's an employee of the Health Authority, but specifically Doctors Nova Scotia were not invited. There was a list of who the Premier expected, and we pretty much went with that list. The IWK wasn't there as well, either. But hopefully, IWK, there is another project that's going to longer term that's done with the Health Authority and the Department of Health on not just violence in healthcare, but violence and injuries. And it's a longer term, it's a 5-year targeted project. And we'll also be sitting on those committees, the Nurses Union. I suspect Doctors Nova Scotia will be engaged in that process. Janet, great presentation. As a rural ER nurse, thanks for advocating for the safety of nurses of Nova Scotia. Well, you're welcome again. And it's, like I said, it's just not acceptable. It's just not acceptable. And we have to make sure that it isn't acceptable, that we don't tolerate it, that it's not part of our job, and report it. Because if we don't hear about it, it didn't happen. We all know that. If you don't chart it, you didn't do it. If you don't tell us about it, even the near misses, even the patient or the family member that comes in and says, I'm going to get you, but they don't do anything. That's a verbal threat. We need to know about that. In Middle Musquodoboit, we are far from security, police, or paladin. Help, in most cases, is an hour to an hour and a half away. Is this going to be addressed by this process? Absolutely. So what's going to happen in Middle Musquodoboit? We're going to have a risk assessment done. And that's going to come through loud and clear that you have no buddy. And our issue with the employer will be, what are you going to do about it? So now that it's identified, and I know you know it, and I'm sure the employer knows it. But when the risk assessment is done, that's not acceptable. So what's the plan? What's the plan? And we're going to be looking for answers to that. On another note, I talked about the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee. Any of you that are on those committees, and those of you that aren't on the committees but know they exist, get to know who is the nurses union rep in your facility on the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee. That person that's on that has a responsibility to make sure risk assessments are done, occupational health and safety is followed, the laws of the law under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, they have a response. We're going to educate them. One of Paul's projects over the next several months is going to be identify those that are on the committees and make sure they know what their responsibilities are. Make sure they know the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Make sure they know the right to refuse and what they should do. So the nurse, there is supposed to be union members. It's a joint occupational health and safety committee. They're going to be responsible to make sure the risk assessment is done. They're going to make sure that whatever comes out of the risk assessment is implemented. That's the job of that committee. So it's a very, very, very important committee. And we're going to do our part as a union to educate our members on those committees about their responsibilities. So you need to find out who's on the committee in your facility. And when these things happen, you need to make sure they find out about it. Because they have a responsibility under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to make sure that they act on anything that's reported to them. They have an obligation. So you have to make sure you know who it is, and when anything happens that you feel is unsafe, you report it. You report it, but more importantly, after you report it, follow up with our member to say, did you guys talk about that at your committee meeting? So did you talk about the fact that our door is wide open all the time? Did you talk about that, and what are we going to do about that? Ask the question. Make sure. The minutes are supposed to be up. You're supposed to be able to get the minutes of those meetings. You want the minutes? Ask them. Those are the kinds of things that are going to make sure that you're working safely. I don't know if there's another question here. No. So the question is, does this apply to all agencies and all facilities and all units, or just ED? This particular report is not just for EDs. It's not for all EDs. It's for community EDs, and the definition's in there. So, for example, it doesn't include Colchester. It doesn't include Dartmouth General. It only includes the littler, I think they're called the community hospitals. So that would be like your Middleton, your Tattamagush, the littler facilities. And like I say, the reason that we went at that, because we had a timeline. The Premier said he wanted the report in the hands of the Minister by December the 30th. Now remember, this was October, so that's not a lot of time to get this kind of stuff done. So the committee decided that, you know what, we'll do the community hospitals first, and then we'll look at expanding it through this other group, the other work that I was talking about, under the workers' comp and awareness and the employers, the other working group that has a 5-year mandate. We're going to be tackling a lot of this stuff with the other bigger facilities, because quite frankly, the larger emergency departments have more staff. Many of them, or if not all, have security right there. So, you know, we really wanted to target it, the littler, more, for lack of a better term, vulnerable emergency departments, where we have 2 nurses by themselves at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there is no security, and there is no personal alarms, and there is no, that's where we wanted to go first. Can someone please use the little hand, if you have a mic on your computer, or the phone, so that you can ask in person so Paul can see if it works? Please. So we'll give them a minute just in case, Paul. Somebody raised their hand. Go ahead. Hello?
Sorry, I have to unmute myself too after you unmute me. It's Helen Yeoman from Social Regional, and I am on our Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee, as well as the Occupational Health and Safety Council for the Western Zone. Perfect. And we were given like a little presentation at the end of September or the end of October that explained that they were going to be doing this safety evaluation. I think probably Queens General will also be one of our small, our community hospital. I don't think they have security 24/7, and they are open 24 hours. So I expect that they'll be included in this, as well as Fisherman's Memorial, but Fisherman's is closed after 11 at night for people walking in. I find your comments are very valuable, and I wanted to make sure that, they also get listed on the website, if that's possible. I know that you can take this, your presentation, but I think there's also good information that's given out, Janet, when you're doing your commentary and answering our questions afterwards.
So this whole thing will be on our website, so nurses can just go on, press play, and watch the whole presentation, including your question. So everything will be there. It'll be tomorrow, though. Like, we'll get it up tomorrow because we just have to run through it. And Colleen, not we, I keep sounding like I have a mouse in my pocket. Colleen has to go through it, listen to it, just to make sure that there's no glitches and the volume's okay. And once she does that, she'll put it up on our website tomorrow for all the nurses to hear. And for your question around Queens and Fisherman's, they absolutely were included. And many of our facilities don't have security. For example, Shetty Camp. Shetty Camp, interestingly enough, has security in the summer. I suspect that's because they see more people in the summer. But, so that part of the risk assessment is going to be security. What are the security needs? What are the security, how many people are there? What are their hours? All that kind of stuff is going to be in the risk assessment. And they're going to have, my understanding is sort of an independent security professional that's going to look at our facilities and decide what level of security should this facility have based on where they are in the province, based on, I'm assuming, I'm not the professional, based on how close is, the policing service, and even if they are next door, how often are they even in the vicinity? So that's great that we have an RCMP detachment next to the hospital, but there's only a member there, maybe two, and they spend most of their time driving into the city. So like, that has to be looked at, and we're gonna look, well, not we, they're gonna have a professional security person look at that for us and give recommendations to us as in the big committee, and most importantly, the employer, because they're ultimately responsible for our safety, but they're ultimately responsible. They are the employer, and they get to decide what security they're going to hire. But their commitment is absolutely to look at the security needs of all our facilities and share with us what they find. They've committed to that. Still there, Helen? Okay.
Yeah, yes, I am. Thank you very much. That answers my question.
Okay, perfect. There's a second question, I understand. Lori? Hi, Lori. You there, Lori? You might have to unmute yourself. You there? You must have lost you, Lori. We can't find you. Okay, is there any other question? He's typing, so we'll wait for you to get your question, Lori. Nope, is she typing? Lori, do you want to type your question and send it in? So while I'm waiting for Lori's question, again, tomorrow we are going to, at noontime, the Premier and the two co-chairs, Carmel D'Entremont and myself, are going to be with the Premier at noon to discuss this report and release this report to the public. And after that, the report will be up on our website, and you can print it and share it and do whatever you like with it. It's really, really good. And my commitment to you is you can hold my personal feet to the fire when you can call me up and say, look, you said April 2017. You said it in this report. It's not happened. In fact, I want you to do it. I want you to look at the recommendations. I want you to call me if it's not. I want you to do that. I want you to talk to your manager. I want you to show it to your manager. She knows about it, to say, look, this report says that this is going to happen by this date. It's not happened. What's going on? You can call your manager and you can call me, and we'll make sure if that is indeed what's happening, we'll find out why, and at the very least, we'll get back to you with an explanation as to why it's not happening. So is there a question, Paul? Okay. So I want to thank those that have participated. Like I say, I'm very, very proud of this work. I do want to talk for a second. There was a lot of people, including our Paul and 2 or 3 other committee members that worked extremely hard. Alex Smith from the Department of Health, Katrina from the Health Authority, and Tanya Penny, who many of you may remember. She used to be an activist with the union. Those individuals worked offside at another table really hard getting this report together. They've done a lot of work, edits, re-edits, rewrites, back and forth all through Christmas. It was a ton of work, and I think we're very lucky that those 4 people were so committed to getting this done, and I really want to personally thank them. Carmel also would like to thank them for all the work they've done on this. Their sense of commitment to this was extraordinary. Anyway, I want to thank you for taking the time. Please share this, share the report. It's no good if we're not talking about it. Feel that you can call me anytime if you have an issue, if you have a patient that is particularly difficult, that your colleagues talk about. I know you guys are emerge nurses, but you hear on the floor that there's a patient that's particularly difficult and they're aggressive, and let us know. Let us know. Talk to your president. Talk to your labor relations staff. Let us know. And we will talk with your employer. We will work with your employer to see what we can do to make sure that you're practicing safely, to make sure that you go home at the end of your shift in the same shape you walked in, just a little more tired, but certainly not hurt. Thanks for your time, and like I say, call me or email me anytime. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about keeping you safe, and I will advocate on your behalf with your employer, with your manager. Our labor relations staff will help you, like they will help you in everything, but they'll help you if you feel unsafe at work. They will make sure that somebody knows and corrective action is underway. Oh, forgot about one more thing. One of the things that was in this report I forgot to mention is the whole debrief. So if and when, or if, hopefully not when, you experience a situation that could have been and was or is violent, like so someone hit you or threatened you, or the employer has committed to making sure that you get proper debrief so that you're taken in and we talk about how did it make you feel, what can we do to make you safe, how can we prevent this from happening in the future. And we're saying as a union, and the employer agrees, that this is automatic and it's not up for debate by either the employer or by you, the nurses. So it is going to happen. And we expect you, the nurses, to participate. Now, you may go in and say, I'm fine. Good. It's going to be offered, and we expect you to go and talk about how it made you feel. And this is not soft stuff. This is not fluff. This is, how did it make you feel? What can we do to prevent it in the future, if anything? What do you want us to do? And do you need time? And do you just want to talk about it? And really, we need this, because that's how PTSD happens. PTSD happens because it happens to us, we shelve it, we walk away, we don't deal with it, and it happens again, we do the same thing, and it happens over and over and over again. Then all of a sudden, you have PTSD, and nobody wants PTSD. Nobody wants you to be suffering from it, so we want it dealt with the first time. The first time and every other time. We want it dealt with by a professional that's trained to do it. So that's my little soapbox for the end. Apparently we have a question. If I talk long enough, people will ask questions. The debrief, there's sort of 2 levels of debrief. So there's the quick check-in to say, you know, are you okay? Do you need anything like right now? Should be within 24 hours of the incident. And then the longer term might be if someone requires professional help with a psychologist or others, then that might be a little longer. The debrief could be an individual, like, so I need help, so they're going to check in. Janet, are you okay? I heard that you had an incident. Are you okay? Do you need help now? Or can we set something up for you? That can happen. So 24 hours for the check-in with your manager or whoever to say, what's going on? How are you feeling? And then as soon as it can be arranged, after that. And then there could be a bigger debrief. So, for example, we just had a debrief in one of our facilities this week that was the whole unit. So all of the nurses in that unit had a debrief about a situation that even if the nurses weren't on when it happened, they had a unit debrief to talk about it. So it could be an individual and it could be a unit. But all that to say, somebody should be checking in within 24 hours of the incident to make sure. And depending on the severity of the incident, immediately. So I don't know if everyone heard that, but a comment was made that there should be enough security in the facility that nurses shouldn't have to leave their units at a code white. All of that is up for discussion. You need to have that conversation with your occupational health and safety rep, for starters. And but I heard it, and I will pass that along when we have our committee meeting. I'm not sure about the practicality. I'm not saying it's not right, but I'm not sure about who is in a code white and how many people do they need. And it'll all depend on the staffing, right? So, you know, some of our units and some of our facilities might have 2 staff on it. Well, in the code white, we might need more than, and then only 1 security. So we might need more than 3 people depending on the situation. So each code white, it'll be consistent, but it'll be consistent depending on the facility. So the process will be the same. The people on the team might be different depending on the facility that we're having it. So there may be difference between the IWK and Dartmouth General, or the IWK and Middleton. So there will be a code white process, but who's on the team might be different depending on the size of the facility. So I think I'm not seeing any more questions. Again, I want to thank you very much for participating. It was a good first experience, I think. I find it a little bit weird looking at the camera. When there's people in the room, I want to look at them. I don't want to look at the camera. But so if I'm off looking that way or this way, Colleen's trying to ground me, but sometimes it's not working. So thanks again for your participation. It's as always, it's been a pleasure to work on this committee on your behalf. And I want to thank, like I thanked the other people. This is a good piece of work that you should be very, very proud of. And make sure you read it and make sure you hold us to our commitments. We made these commitments and we intend to keep them. Thanks again.